Analogy 223, Chapter 9, Book Presentation 3. We're talking about different components of a role on a team: role transmission, role clarity, role acceptance, role satisfaction, all of which play a point in terms of cohesion on a team. So with role transmission, I thought this was a very complicated way to state that the coach creates the culture and the roles within that culture. I thought it could have been like one paragraph and that's it. But they really like to elaborate on some different bullet points here. And I will say this, it's an extension of a process that is creating and conveying to the athletes what is expected in terms of norms and what is expected in terms of norms for the team, as well as norms for specific roles. And they go into like role sender, focal person. They seem like a lot of fluff and stuff, but I think really if you kind of dissect it down and you look at what you're trying to do as a coach, you're trying to create a culture that is defining the role, defining what your expectation is regarding the role within the culture of the team, as well as the culture of the group, and maybe even to a point of the individual. So when athletes better understand this, there's better clarity. And when there's more clarity, there's less anxiety. They're able to be more effective. And there's less ambiguity in what it is they're trying to accomplish. And, if there is ambiguity in the process, they're going to be less effective. And quite honestly, they're going to be more critical of others. They'll be more critical of the team as well as their coach. And just think this through. If there's no expectation given regarding what it is I need to accomplish, if I've not been given any kind of extrinsic motivation, Adrian, I need you to accomplish X, Y, Z to be a starter. And then I'm not informed what I need to accomplish. When you get to a point when you're not a starter, you're left to question like, well, how come I'm not a starter? I did really well. But you need to have some kind of context of what it is you need to achieve on a bigger picture. That ambiguity provides no structure, no framework. The lack of communication provides no structure, no framework, which provides the ambiguity, which then provides a little more stress because there's uncertainty in the process. So I will say to you as a coach, you need to have a really strong understanding of his process to be able to provide that clarity to your athletes so they know what it is you're trying to accomplish, and also what your expectation is of them and what you want them to accomplish. To do so is to leave them kind of just twisting in the wind like a bunch of laundry hanging outside, and they really won't be able to fully embrace what your expectation is, and then they'll end up being more critical of the coach, which for most coaches that's indifference, who cares anyways. But they'll be critical of the coach because they have no other way to really comprehend or process why they're in the situation they're in, why they're not starting, why they're not playing. There's been no guideline, no structure, no expectation set. With role acceptance, this is a little bit on the athlete side, but you also as a coach have to kind of, as you see your team kind of fall into place, there's a certain acceptance that you have as an athlete to understand your space and your place on a team. And it reads a lot from the athlete side, but I will also say that it's on the coaching side to kind of accept that, hey, your person that's coming in might not be the point guard that you thought, but man, they could be a number 3. They could be a solid forward, right? If you're talking basketball. And you kind of start to evaluate this and go, all right, even though I have a certain vision or bias of what I think a person, my athlete, can or can't do, that may change when you get into the practice environment. And that may also change when they get into the context of being within a group or a team, right? Because they'll find their place and their space within the team, and they may find that their skill set is better served in perhaps a different role, playing weak side corner versus strong side linebacker. I should say strong side corner versus weak side linebacker. I got that backwards, which is very much something that can happen. So this skill might not be correctly matched for what you're trying to ask them to perform. And as a coach, you have to then kind of accept the fact that maybe you've misplaced them, and you can fight that battle and set your athlete up for failure. But if you move them from weak side linebacker to strong side corner, well, all right, maybe you're going to see some success out of that athlete, which should then translate out to success for your team. The other part of this is, what if your athlete's just not willing to accept the role? I don't want to play weak side corner. I'm a linebacker, but you're going to play weak side corner. You're not really going to play linebacker. You kind of have to look at this and understand strong corner, weak linebacker, strong linebacker, weak corner. Who cares? You're playing. You're doing great. We're putting you in the best position to be successful. What's the problem? And you may have to win over your athletes because they won't have the role acceptance, the role that you're providing, and you think that they'll be best for. You may have to actually talk them through that process to help them understand where their skills are best utilized. So later on, the book seems to kind of go into the fact that role acceptance kind of depends upon 4 conditions. This is a little bit later on, but it's the opportunity to use your specialized skills, the feedback and role recognition, role significance, and autonomy. My example of using a weak side linebacker and strong side corner, you look at the skills that are there. What really differentiates is one's more like run support, the other one's more pass support. But long and short of it, depending upon your scheme, you could have a weak side corner that does a ton, or a strong side corner that does a ton of blitzing in that scheme, and are like a little mini linebacker anyways. And so you can really leverage the skills that that player brings to the table in a different context. And like feedback and role recognition, you have to do this as a coach. We talked about it earlier where you recognize your star players. Of course, they get plenty of stickers on their helmet, but there are plenty of practice players who help make that process happen. And you have to be cognizant of that, and you have to recognize those people. Like when I coached youth football, I have my old jersey from college and I have my old jersey from high school. And each week we had a practice player recognition, and we had a game player recognition, and one of them wore my college jersey, the other one wore my practice jersey all week in practice. It was just a nice way to recognize those athletes for the contributions that they made, whether they were something on the field or on the practice field. And you start to then put in place, as a coach, you can articulate the significance of what it is they do. Vlad ran for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns in our game. Great job. You get the game ball. You get to wear the college jersey or the high school jersey. In this practice the other day, I saw, John do this, and this, and he was tough all week. And actually, he did a lot of great things that helped us to better prepare for the game this past weekend. And so to that end, here's the college jersey. You have to recognize it. You have to recognize what they've done, and also articulate what the significance is of each role. There's a little bit of the concept, again, of autonomy, right? You like to have the ability to have your athletes have a little bit of autonomy to be able to make their own decisions, and that lends itself back to the conversation of extrinsic versus intrinsic. If they don't have autonomy, they're completely reliant upon a dictator and somebody who's constantly giving them demands and cues and direction. They'll never be able to make decisions on their own in the game because they're always relying on that voice kind of in the back of their head, which is you, the coach. And on the field of play, you won't be there to bark at them all the time. So you got to allow your athletes to have little successes, to be able to have their own autonomy, to be able to perform on their own. And I can't stress this enough. I mean, it's you, the coach, that sets that environment up. All right, with role satisfaction, this kind of ties back into role acceptance. The sooner your athlete can accept their role, and you as a coach can accept that maybe they're a better fit for one position versus the other, then you can really utilize their skills. And then once you've won that athlete over and they're playing in the different position that they're accustomed to, they'll have little successes, little failures, a couple more successes, maybe a failure, a couple more successes, failure. And that's what you'd like to have, is like a 2 to 3 positive to 1 negative ratio, right? But you start to put together that they start having kind of this virtuous cycle where they learn how to feel satisfied with their role because they're experiencing great success within the role that they were not experiencing before. And then it lends itself to, look what you're doing in the practice environment. Oh my God, you're destroying our scout team in that new role. I mean, you're really tying into this role great, and I think you've really adopted it well. I think you're going to be great when we play, the other high school on Saturday. And you start to really not only help that athlete have greater acceptance of the role, but they start to understand their significance of contribution within the role itself. And it's a significance of contribution to the team, but it comes from this personal satisfaction of knowing that they're doing something well. And it again comes from the coach being able to apply that feedback and recognition regarding performance to let them know, both one-on-one, but also in front of the team, great job, nice job. Notice how you dipped your shoulder, you did that. You weren't doing that in your other position. I think this is really a great fit for you. Now, next time you do it, do this, this, and this. And then when they come back on the next play and they do something very similar, but maybe not exact, it becomes, all right, John, I got to ask you, you did this, this, and this. What do you think? And he's like, they'll probably tell you, well, I wanted to try a skill from when I played the other position and apply it over here, and it seemed to work well. What do you think? And you can just reinforce and say, yeah, I thought it worked great. Maybe evolve that a little bit more and work on that skill set. And I think you'll really be just an absolute hurricane on the court. So my point is this. You start to connect the dots between these different little tidbits of information. And, it's whether you're connecting from role acceptance to role satisfaction, or you're taking your athlete and trying to connect extrinsic motivators and make them intrinsic, whatever it is, start to connect these dots together and realize the complexity that all of us has, but also the complexity that you as a coach can help manipulate and, leverage to the advantage of your student athletes. So when you have an athlete who is in role conflict, they might be lacking like their sufficient ability, the motivation, the time, etc. Then I'll say this, let's go back to the example of somebody who might be like a weak side linebacker and they have some of the skills, but not all the skills to help them be successful. You recognize that as a coach and you say, why don't we try you at strong side corner? And now all of a sudden, the ability that they didn't have at one side really parlays itself into having a ton of ability on the other side. It's the old adage of, a fish looks like a moron when you ask it to climb a tree. It just can't do it. It's physically not capable of climbing a tree. Paraphrase that, by the way, just so you know, it's not an exact quote. And there's also the concept of you're expecting a desired outcome and they can't reach that desired outcome. They're not able to achieve that. And so you have to recognize that as a coach. And it might be a knee-jerk reaction where you're like, I'll take you out and I'll put this other person in. But you might find that you still have utility within that first athlete somewhere else. So, role conflict ties into role ambiguity, and role ambiguity ties into a negative effect on confidence, and that could be completely detrimental to that athlete on a much bigger picture. All right, guys, moving on to the next one.